She'll breed, you'll die, everyone in the company will die. Here's your look at the new NECA Toys Alien Resurrection. This is the Alien Queen Deluxe Action Figure. "200 years after her death, military scientists are attempting to clone Ellen Ripley in order to extract the Queen embryo that was in her body when she died, and on the 8th attempt, they succeed. The Queen is extracted and raised, but she and the Ripley clone have been contaminated with each other's DNA, resulting in surprising changes to both. Featuring more than 25 points of articulation, including a spectacular posable tail, hinged jaw, sliding head, and more, includes display stand and 2 different interchangeable inner mouths. We're going to go ahead and figure out how tall and how long the Alien Queen is, just so you guys know as well. I've done one of the configurations. There's 2 possible configurations for how you can display the figure. We'll talk about all of that in a second. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves after all. First, taking the tape measure and putting it to the very top of her crown. There we go. And stopping it right there. The figure, based on this configuration, the figure stands 11.5 inches in height. And switching that over to centimeters, you're looking at almost 30 centimeters, 29.4 to be exact. Length is going to be something that's going to be a little bit different in the sense that, well, for me to show you the length, this will be gauged by how long you put the tail. I prefer to actually have the tail bent around her, so I'm going to be displaying her like that. Based on how I've configured her and displaying her currently, I'm going to go from the end of her jaw right here to the very end of where I've got the tail curled. Now again, you can have the tail full length, which is basically another one of the Queen long, if that makes any sense. So basically, like if you wanted to have the tail a full length, it basically would be about the same length as the Queen added on to that, and even a little bit after that. But based on this length from here to here, you're looking at the figure being lengthwise about 14.6 inches in length. And switching that to centimeters, my friends, 37.1 or 37 centimeters long. Just in case you guys wanted to see some scale comparisons, I'm going to bring in just one of the aliens that I happen to have nearby in my collection. This, I think, is the Alien vs. Predator Arachnoid Alien. I'm actually still liking this one quite a bit. You can see how much bigger. There's quite a big size difference. There it is right there between the Alien Resurrection Queen and basically one regular scaled sized alien, also from the folks over at NECA Toys. Some assembly is required when you get this out of the box. I'll kind of show you how everything kind of comes together when you get it out of the box. The first things you'll be treated to are her 2 versions of her inner jaw. One an elongated, popped out jaw, and then one more closed up that can also tuck inside of her mouth. I simply just left it off of the figure for the time being so that you guys can see the 2, and then we can attach those accordingly. Nice detail on both the jaws. I mean, really, other than the fact that one jaw is open, they're almost similar to one another. You can kind of see how one jaw would be, other than just not open. It's almost just like half the length of this one right here. They tab into place the same way. You want to spin that around so that these, of course, these shapes match up accordingly, and they'll just attach into her mouth. I'll show you guys that in a second as well. I've done one side of her body. What are you talking about? Asked the viewer. She also gets these fins, these little spikes that, of course, stick out from her torso. Anybody that's collected the Aliens version of Alien Queen basically will come across the same problem with these. Yes, they do attach into place. Yeah, don't worry, I'll show you guys that in a second. But depending on how you rotate her head, frequently you'll probably find these popping off. So I just opted at the beginning of this review to leave them off so that you guys can see a close-up look at these, and then I'll attach them accordingly. They all attach by ball joints, a bit of a loose joint, and like I said, any bit of moving on the head, you'll again probably find these popping off frequently. I dare use the word G, the G word, and the G word being glue. Glue might be something that you may find yourself eventually coming around to using for actually pegging these into place, getting the position that you want. Gluing them in place will at least guarantee that these aren't going to be going anywhere. But the size of her crown and head overall, the head will be frequently clipping against these. Luckily, these are soft plastic, but frequent turning of the head. Yeah, I know. I'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, she comes with her V-shaped display stand, which is located right down below here. This is crucial for keeping the figure standing upright. She simply just doesn't have the supported weights. The compensation, it really does ask a lot of her legs. So I would suggest, most definitely, when you get this out of the packaging, I'm just going to put her there just to show you guys, just to quickly show you, and then we'll pick her back up. This is what the display stand looks like, just a clear bit of plastic shaped almost kind of like the letter A or a V, if you will. And then there is two types of metal posts. One of the shorter variety, one of the longer variety. And this will be of configurations depending on which way you want to display the figure. If you really wanted to, you could display her upright, you know, very, very angry. That's probably not the way you would want to confront a queen. Or there's also one in which she is in a walking or running pose. This is what I ended up going with the opener of this review. And I'll show you guys how that kind of comes about. So we're going to pick up the alien queen. She's a bit cumbersome just by her size. And if you flip her upside down, this is kind of where everything comes together on her. And we'll talk about those fins also in a second as well. Underneath is the thorax, I guess, if you want to consider that, or the endoskeleton of the queen. And then you have two different types of connector points and two different types of poles. Now, you could really mix and match these. I find the solvable solution for if you want to have her in a walking pose is using the shorter length post and using this type of clip here. These will go in two different places. The other one is a clamp. This clamp's around. Well, I'll show you that in a second. But if you want to get her in a walking pose, might I suggest, if I can, use the smaller post and use this kind of W peg. What you're going to do is you're going to take the figure of the queen, and if I just kind of move her legs just out of the way slightly, right in between here, between her two arms, you may find yourself finding a simpler solution to the problem. But you just take that clamp, and that clamp basically fits in between her arms like that. Depending on where the weight is located, you may choose also to flip the stand around and have it the opposite direction. It seems that it's the same way either way. It's just a matter of, again, which way you want to display the stand. So if you put it in between her arms, it's more than enough stability to kind of keep everything in the queen intact. Keep her, you know, on, not on fours, but certainly on her twos. And you can have her in a walking or running pose. That's a good way to display her. This is likely going to be the way I'm going to be displaying the figure, just because she's low profile. She's not taking up a lot of space, though she is a fair-sized figure. And I think she is, I've always liked the look of a walking or running queen. One of the cool aspects of the AVP movie, even though a lot of people don't like the Alien vs. Predator film, is I love the scene of having the queen emerge and charge towards them. This is not something you would see very often. It seems also kind of later into the films where you actually got a more moving queen. Prior to that, she was kind of always kind of fixated in one area. Granted, yes, she would have been up on the ship in the finale of Aliens. But even still, though, she wasn't really moving around. You didn't see much CG versions of the queen. A lot of it was all animatronics. So again, this is probably going to be the way I'm going to display the figure. If you want to, however, go in the other route, you're going to just go ahead and take the clamp like so. Just twist it onto the post. And once again, we'll just take the figure off of the stand. I'm always trying my best to lay it down in such a way that I don't feel like I'm doing too much damage to it. Ultimately, I feel like I'm just flipping over a live lobster. That's a good analogy. We're going to go ahead and twist this off, and we're going to go ahead and twist this on like that. And now you've got a different type of clamp. It's not going to clamp in the same position, and I've looked a couple of places where it would work best for the queen. If you want to have her in an upright kind of commanding presence, you can bring down the head like so. And the clamp sort of wedges itself right around the rib cage, if this would be the rib cage of the queen, and you can kind of just prop it against that. Find yourself to just compensate on the legs like that. You can bring down the arms, you can bring down the larger arms, and of course you can bring down the head as much as the head will give you, and you can pose her in this way as well. Now, this doesn't give you much, like I said, stability, but it certainly still gives you the option of displaying the queen upright, and a neat way to also display the figure. This would be a great opportunity if they had given us that little side sack. Well, I guess this queen wouldn't have had that because she would have had Ripley's DNA, but even like the original Alien Queen, if they had found a way to incorporate the egg sac, that would have been also a nice touch also as well. So those are the two different ways that you can display the figure. Again, I've tried to find another place where this conveniently sits. You can also put it around her arms, and there is, right there, pre-molded sockets that almost even say to themselves, that should be where those can sit. And that might also give you a proper stability. In fact, that might even give you a stronger, stable footing than the place that I originally had put there. So it's a couple of different, like I said, being that those grooves, the way that they are molded, kind of lends themselves to telling you guys where about those little peg systems go. Again, if you want to use her in a running pose, you probably would be better suited to use this stand. And if you wanted to have her upright, it's best to go ahead with using that stand. Okay, we've spent a lot of time talking about stands. Let's talk about the figure itself. We can go back and revisit what we were discussing before. These little fins, remember these? Well, you get 3 different sizes. What you really want is to have like the tallest at the front and fan its way down. Now, these are just on ball joints, and they just simply, let me just move the arm out of the way. There's 3 on one side, and there's 3 fluted holes on the other side. You're just going to take one of them and just work that into the ball socket like that, and you want to just continue until you've got them all together. Now, I did notice that when you are putting them in, there is a specific, even on the back of the box, they've kind of got the fan, if you will, facing outward. Kind of that be your guide as to how you attach those into place. Just kind of wiggle those in, and then again you'll just continue like this one right here, being that, see, it's facing out this way, you'll want to go on this side of the figure. Now the problem is, as you already have seen it, when you rotate the head, it immediately clips these, and if they're not securely in place, these are simply just going to pop right out. Several times of trying to get the figure prepped for this review, moving the head back and forth, it was just a matter of time before those got clipped. There really isn't a whole lot of clearance, and even like the longest one, which should go like right here, it just doesn't give you much wiggle space. As you can see, like that's brushing right up against the crown. The moment you rotate the head, you're banging and clipping against this. Yeah, you can bring these down a little bit, but I don't find it's still enough clearance, and eventually these things will fall off. I don't want to dare use the word, that glue word, but it's a possibility of something that you may want to end up ultimately doing. One of the other things for the assembly that we had talked about at the beginning of this review was the fact that you can also peg in, remember the longer and smaller jaw? Well, let's go ahead and visit those now. Take the shape, and if you look really close at the inner workings of her jaw, it's shaped like kind of like a big chunky L. Well, so that when you are putting it in, or kind of like a 7, I suppose, as well, you want to put it in so that the larger, thicker square goes on this side, if that makes any sense. Just going to tab that into place. It's kind of hard to kind of get your finger in there, but you have the inner jaw. And again, you can repeat that step completely if you want to have the elongated jaw. And just going to tab that in the exact same way. Just like that. The only downside, though, is this is something that if you do want to display your queen with her mouth open and not necessarily having the inner jaw out, or if you want to have her mouth closed, you may decide completely you just want to remove that altogether. And at least with it being so easily tabbed and removed, just taking that out couldn't be any bit easier, and then you could just close up the mouth. I kind of prefer myself to have the queen with the option to open and close her mouth and just have the jaw, the inner jaw, removed altogether. So that's all the assembly that is required when you get this fantastic looking representation of the queen out of packaging. This is, again, we've gotten this queen before. And I don't think there's been much in the way of tweaking from the tweak department to change the queen differently from the one that we had gotten from Aliens as opposed to Alien Resurrection, other than really just a new coat of paint. The new coat of paint now gives her a very kind of copperish chocolate color. In fact, from head to toe, that's basically all you're seeing is all this dark brown color scheme. One thing I love is that NECA toys have added a shinier paint to some of the areas, like her crown, for example. It gives her kind of a slick, wet, mucousy surface that I would imagine the queen would possess. Get a gander, though. I mean, if you look at that, what a glorious looking crown that they've sculpted on this figure. Like also in the earlier queen, the dome does slide forward and back. It's actually the other way around. It's more so the jaw that slides in and out, but they've mimicked it by having this part, the actual crown, as being something that shifts back and forth. That way, like in the movie, when she does reveal herself, you just move, you're just sliding the crown back, and therefore it looks as if the mouth is moving outward. Getting a close-up look at her face, if you want to call it her face, of course. Again, just phenomenal looking detail. I like the translucency that they've added to her teeth. The little tendons on the side of her jaw also done in the translucent plastic. I gotta believe that all of this here is translucent plastic, and then there's just been varying colors of additional paint that's been added, say, on the lower jaw. But it does look like it was all made from a clear plastic. It's got a hinge so you can move it up and down, and you really would be surprised how much articulation this queen actually possesses. We'll of course talk about that also in a second. Some nice dark colorings right underneath there, and really it's only the surfaces that stick out the furthest that get this kind of copper brown. Even areas down in here where you move the crown, I keep wanting a crown or crest also. This section here gets a little kept darker, while this area here gets that copper color. It really is a nice color. I wasn't sure how I was going to react to using, or for NECA for using, a color this brown. I mean, from the film, it does have a brownish color. I thought that maybe they might have gone too brown by the coloring that they opted to go with for this particular queen. But, you know, I got to admit, physically having it in hand, it really does look good. And it's, I think the bonus on top of that is the fact that it does have that shinier paint that's added to it. If it was matte, now granted there are some areas on it that do look a little bit more matte in color. I think if all of it was that color, I think it would lose something a little bit. But they've kept that slimy exterior of paint, both on the front and, of course, on this crest, that I think really does give it that life, that sliminess that you would imagine the queen to possess. She does have the very long tail, so much so that to show it fully off, if I can bend the tail out, it is on a wire frame. It is, in fact, another queen's length. So there's the queen from here to here. The tail is even more that. It's another one of the queen and another chunk on top of that still. It's got that coiled cording of a tail. It is a wire frame, so you can manipulate and bend that. Personally, for my space, and I certainly don't have a lot of space, I probably would go the route of just bending the tail, just to kind of keep it out of the way. If you have it at full length, I mean, you could have, if you have a long enough shelf, by all means, have that tail full in its full glorious length, but I probably would be bending the tail myself. Okay, so let's have a look at her posability. There's a fair bit actually to cover off here. I guess you could count the crest, this part right here, this shifting slot, as really part of her articulation. So we'll go ahead and put that in there as well. Her head moves back and forth on an independent ball joint. The mouth opens and closes on its own hinge. Then you've got a ball joint here. I guess you would say, what, mid-neck, there's a ball joint. And then there's a neck ball joint here where this attaches to the torso. Moving along, the torso itself is on a ball joint, so you can sway that a little bit to the left or to the right, up and down. The tail has a swivel. You can move that back and forth. I don't know if I've seen often where the Queen's tail is straight up like that, so you probably, even though this does rotate, I probably would keep it low like this. The legs move forward and back. They're actually in two places. Let me just lift it up so you can see. This part here swivels back and forth, but then there is an independent hinge that actually has the legs kind of cave in on themselves, and that hinges back and forth like that. She has a knee joint here that bends back and forth. She does also have a hind leg hinge joint. And she does also have articulation in the foot as well as the toes. I've always loved the fact that the Queen has high heels. There's something very cool about that. For the arms, the smaller set of arms hinge back and forth. Those are on a hinge joint as opposed to a ball joint. The secondary forearms hinge at a bend there, and also the hands themselves bend and rotate back and forth. Then you have the larger arms, those rotate back and forth. They are also on a ball joint, and if I can show you, they swivel here. You can see that? They swivel right there, and then there's actually a joint right there. So it's actually a pin hinge joint happening right there, allowing the arms to move back and forth. She does have not one, but two bends in the elbow. I have to keep moving the figure because there's a lot to show here. The hands rotate back and forth, and they also hinge up and down. Also like the sculpt. Just draw your quick attention, if I can, to the sculpting of her hand. I like that it's slightly different of a sculpt than what we got with the standalone xenomorphs, as it almost seems like a sectional separate part of a finger here, where you got these smaller fingers that run off from the main three. I always really like the design of that. And again, you can see how it's been done in black plastic, and then you've got this coffee brown that's been painted over top of that, and even that has such a glorious looking sheen to it. Let's go ahead and get the figure back in her proper placement, and I'm just going to lay her down once again. I really don't like to keep doing that, but we're going to do that just for the sake of twisting off the actual post. Put the new post back on, because again, in my personal preference for displaying the figure would be, once again, just to have her in a more walking pose. I think it just showcases the figure a little bit more. We just bend the legs a little bit back, forward like that, and we can rest. Compensation, of course, we're going to have to bend those legs, I think, to fix up everything that we started with when we were looking at the posability. And just bend the head up. And there, you've got yourself one phenomenal looking display piece. It is a real shame that my original Aliens Queen that I had in my collection, I parted ways with. I parted ways with thinking that I really didn't need it, simply just boiled down to space. I thought in the back of my mind, well, if NECA ever re-released the Aliens Queen, I would probably pick her up again, and as Lady Luck would have it, we didn't get necessarily a re-release of the Aliens Queen, but we did get something just as good, and that is the Aliens Resurrection Queen. Say whatever you feel about the movie itself. Got to admit, I really do like this release of NECA Toys. If you will, technically, it's kind of a second chance if you missed out your chance the first time around, or like me, sadly sold your original Aliens Queen. When you're a company like NECA Toys, and you've been making figures for as long as you have, it's really hard to be defined by one or two figures. Frequently, I'll get comments and questions by new collectors to the world of collecting figures, and they'll ask me, what would be a definitive figure to get from, say, NECA Toys? It's been hard to try to give them answers. Usually I'll say, pick up a Jason Voorhees or a Freddy Krueger for its availability. But I think if you were to really be defined by a toy, one or three for an example, NECA Toys, I think some of their finest pieces were the movie Turtles, the 7-inch variety, the Gremlins Spider Gremlin, and the Aliens Alien Queen. Now, I understand the ones that I've just listed are a little bit more expensive. They're not as available as, say, the Ultimate figures that frequent the toy store shelves and frequent the retail shelf space right now that you could easily pick up. The Spider Gremlins, for example, the Spider Gremlin was something that was re-released, so picking that one up might not be too bad. The Alien Queen, however, if you manage to get the first initial release of her, you'll know that the prices have skyrocketed on her. So, unfortunately, if you wanted to pick up pieces like that, you may have to source out aftermarket places like eBay. I, unfortunately, fall under the category of once owning the original Aliens Queen and parted ways with it, thinking I just didn't need it as part of my collection anymore. Another case of seller's remorse. Luckily, though, I can kind of live vicariously now through the new Alien Resurrection Alien Queen, because it's basically what we had gotten before with the previous Alien Queen, other than a new slapped coat of paint. Kind of liking the brown coloring of this one. Looking at it from a distance, it actually kind of comes across more like a bronze statue than anything else. It's a fully posable queen, and with it being fully posable, there are, of course, some complications for getting the figure to stand. Luckily, they have supported the figure with a post stand, so that if you want to have her displayed upright, or if you want to have her displayed in a walking pose like I've got here in Final Looks, you can pull off both feet with the included post, and I like that. This figure does look splendid, looks stunning. Still has the same problems that the original Queen had. Primarily, it's those little fin posts that you put into the back of her torso. Those are really notorious for popping off, especially if you rotate the head left and right. If you can get her in a permanent pose where, like this for example, this is probably how I'm going to end up displaying the figure, then most definitely I can kind of navigate around the crown and get those finned posts back into place, those little spikes. I've left them off completely here in Final Looks, but most definitely when I decide to finally put this one on display, something of which I should have done with the first initial Aliens Queen, but I at least can do now with this one, I'm probably going to now put those fins, those spikes back in her back where they belong. Highly would recommend this figure, and the beauty of this one is, being that it's a new release, you should be able to pick it up for the price that it's being asked for, not the price that what scalpers and online companies are selling the original Aliens Queen for if you didn't get a chance to pick up that one initially. So take my advice for a definitive figure that defines a company. You can't look any bit better than the Alien Queen from Alien Resurrection. If you manage to pick up this figure for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section. I always like reading your comments. What do you guys think of the new Alien Resurrection Alien Queen? Do you still have your original Aliens Alien Queen, or did you part ways with it like I did? Total seller's remorse. I'm glad this one was able to come out. Again, guys, let me know in the comments section what you think of the Alien Queen. I love this figure, and I definitely will not be parting ways with this one like I did with the other one. Also, if you guys are new to this channel, or let's say you're longtime viewers and maybe never got around to it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, swing next door, and turn on your bell notification so when future videos are coming onto this channel, you'll never miss out. We're going to, of course, have a whole bunch of new NECA reviews slated to be released on this channel, so keep your eyes peeled, your peepers peeled for future videos, because there's going to be a whole lot of stuff coming your way. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.